Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive. Really glad you could join us today because we're tackling something I think a lot of people experience.
Absolutely. We're diving into a really interesting mission today, looking at that feeling of just, total mental exhaustion when you're learning or using English.
Right. It's more than just being tired, isn't it? It's this specific kind of burnout. And we actually got a great suggestion from a listener that really nailed the topic.
We did. They framed it perfectly. The suggested title was, "Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab." Today's podcast, Advanced English Listening Practice topic name is Why Your Brain Gets Tired in English.
And that's exactly what we're exploring, that drained feeling, maybe a headache after an English lecture or a long meeting or even just trying to follow a fast podcast.
Mm-hmm. It's a very real thing.
Right.
It's often called listening fatigue. And it's not just in your head, so to speak. It's a genuine cognitive phenomenon.
So your brain is actually having to work much, much harder, using more energy just to process English when it's not your native language.
Precisely. It turns what should be an exciting learning journey into something that can feel like a real slog, physically and mentally, for millions of learners worldwide.
The core idea being that listening in English when it's your second language, L2, requires so much mental effort, decoding sounds, finding words, understanding grammar all at once, that it just overwhelms the brain's available resources.
Exactly. It's not like listening in your first language, your L1, which is pretty much automatic. This is sustained, high-intensity mental work.
Okay, so why is it so important for you, the listener, to understand this difference? Why not just say, I'm tired?
Well, because knowing the why behind the fatigue, the actual mechanics, gives you power. It helps you understand how to approach listening differently, maybe more strategically.
So you can listen longer, learn more effectively, and hopefully avoid that really painful burnout feeling.
That's the goal. And to really get a handle on it, we need to start with the basics, what's actually happening inside your brain, the neurology, the psychology of it all.
What makes L2 listening so different from L1?
That's where we need to start. Let's dive into the science of this cognitive overload.
Right. So we usually think listening is passive. Yeah. Like you just sit there and absorb it.
In your native language, L1, it mostly is. It feels effortless, like your brain's on autopilot. The sounds go in, understanding comes out.
But switch to English, if it's your L2, and suddenly it's different. It feels active, like you're constantly having to do something.
That's a great way to put it. It's like you've gone from driving an automatic car to suddenly having to manually shift gears, steer, check mirrors, navigate all consciously all at once.
And that feeling, that effort, scientists have a term for that, right? Cognitive load.
Exactly. Cognitive load is basically the total amount of mental horsepower your brain needs to allocate to a task. And when you shift from L1 to L2 listening, that load doesn't just nudge up a bit, it skyrockets.
Why such a big jump? What's the brain juggling?
It's doing several really demanding things simultaneously. It's trying to identify sounds that might be unfamiliar, map them to words, access the meaning of those words, figure out the grammatical structure.
All while holding it in memory.
All while holding that information in working memory, yes. Everything that's automatic for a native speaker becomes a deliberate, conscious, and frankly, energy-draining process for the non-native listener.
And this intentional effort, that's what researchers call listening effort.
Listening effort. Study after study shows non-native listeners have to consciously pump more cognitive resources into understanding speech, especially if the conditions aren't perfect, like if there's background noise. That effort is the sort of metabolic cost of learning.
What's really cool, though, is that this isn't just a feeling. We can actually measure this strain, can't we? Like there's actual physical evidence.
Oh, absolutely. Science gives us some really concrete ways to see the brain working harder. One of the most revealing methods is pupillometry.
Measuring pupil dilation, how does that work?
It's fascinating. When your brain is under significant mental strain, high cognitive load, working memory tasks, your pupils involuntarily get wider, even if the light level stays the same. It's a direct physical sign that the brain is burning more fuel.
And studies have used this for L2 listening.
They have. There was a key study with Italian speakers who were very proficient in English. Researchers found their pupils dilated significantly more when listening to English sentences, especially with background noise, compared to native speakers.
Okay, so they were working harder, but did they understand less?
Here's the kicker. Their comprehension accuracy was often just as high as the native speakers.
Wow. so they got the same result, but it cost them way more effort.
Exactly. Their brains were massively compensating. They were cranking up their attention, using more working memory, really pushing hard to bridge that gap. And that intense effort is what leads to faster fatigue later on. It's like sprinting versus jogging. You cover the same ground, but one wears you out much quicker.
That makes sense. Are there other ways to see this effort? What about looking directly at brain activity?
Yes, we can use EEG, electroencephalography. EEG tracks changes in brain waves, which correlate with different types of mental activity, including effort.
And what does EEG tell us about L2 listening?
Well, it shows some interesting things related to when someone learned English. For example, people who learned English later in life often show higher EEG alpha power when listening in noisy situations.
Alpha power. What does that signify? Is that good or bad?
Alpha waves are often linked to rest, or importantly, inhibiting irrelevant information. So higher alpha power here suggests the brain isn't just working to understand the English, it's actively spending energy trying to block out the noise and interference. It's an extra layer of effort.
So earlier exposure might actually help automate some of that filtering, lessen the load later.
That seems to be the case. More consistent early exposure might help tune those neural filters.
And which parts of the brain are really feeling the strain during all this?
Key language areas are working overtime. You've got Broca's area, involved in producing language and understanding structure, and Wernicke's area, which is crucial for understanding the meaning of spoken words. They're both in heavy analysis mode.
Okay, but what happens when things get really tough, like a noisy room or a strong accent?
That's when the load gets even heavier. In those adverse conditions, the brain has to call in the big guns, the frontal lobe.
The frontal lobe. Isn't that for, like, high-level thinking, planning, decision-making, focus?
Precisely. It's the brain's CEO handling executive functions. And if you need your CEO to step in just to understand basic sentences because of noise or accents, that's incredibly inefficient and, metabolically speaking, very expensive.
So using the frontal lobe for basic listening just drains the battery faster.
Dramatically faster. This sustained frontal lobe activity is a big part of what some researchers call the bilingual disadvantage in speech perception, especially in noise.
Wait, a disadvantage? I thought being bilingual was good for the brain.
It absolutely is overall. Bilingualism boosts cognitive flexibility, like building mental muscle. But specifically for the task of understanding speech really quickly in the middle of competing noise, non-native speakers often do struggle more than monolinguals.
Why is that?
It often comes down to something called phonotactics.
Phonotactics. Sounds technical.
It just refers to the rules in the language about which sounds can go together and where. Think about English words like strength, that inks cluster at the end. Native speakers have unconsciously internalized these patterns. Their brains expect them, even anticipate them.
So they can kind of predict or fill in the gaps, even if noise obscures part of the word.
Exactly. Their brains have optimized filters for English sound patterns. If your first language, say Spanish or Japanese, has very different phonotactic rules, your brain doesn't have that built-in English filter. It has to consciously work harder just to identify the English sounds, especially when noise is trying to mask them.
So you're not just decoding words, you're actively fighting the noise without the native speaker's automatic noise canceling feature. Wow. And this constant struggle, this intense effort to compensate, can lead you to hit a wall. Researchers call this the effort ceiling.
The effort ceiling.
Yeah.
Like you can't push any harder.
Essentially, yes. There was a telling experiment with non-native Swedish-speaking school children. In noisy classroom conditions, their pupils dilated more, showing maximum effort. Okay, they were trying really hard.
But their actual comprehension accuracy was lower than the native Swedish speakers.
So maximum effort didn't lead to maximum results. They hit a limit.
They hit that ceiling. The cognitive demand just exceeded the system's capacity. Pushing harder didn't help anymore.
And that sustained max effort state, that's what leads to burnout.
That's the direct path to resource depletion. Think of your attention and working memory like a phone battery. If you run multiple demanding apps constantly, like decoding accents, guessing vocabulary, filtering noise, that battery drains fast.
And when the battery hits zero,
your brain triggers stress responses. Cortisol levels might rise, performance drops, and you get that subjective feeling learners describe as brain fog. It's not imaginary. It's the physiological result of running on empty.
This is huge. So the key takeaway is, if you feel exhausted listening to English, your brain isn't broken or lazy. It's actually working incredibly hard in manual mode, using its most powerful resources just to keep up.
Precisely. And understanding that this cognitive load is real and measurable is the first step. Now we can look at what specifically pushes that load over the edge into fatigue territory.
Okay, so we know the brain's working overtime, hitting this cognitive load limit. But the fatigue isn't just random, right? There must be specific things about listening to English that act as triggers.
Oh, absolutely. It's not random at all. Certain factors reliably crank up that cognitive load, turning a simple conversation into, as you said, a mental marathon. We can group these into, say, linguistic challenges, things about the language itself, and then environmental or contextual challenges.
Makes sense. Let's start with the language itself. What's the first big hurdle? You mentioned accents earlier.
Right. Trigger number 1, unfamiliar accents and dialects. English is spoken globally with huge variation. You might get comfortable with, say, a standard American accent, and then suddenly you encounter someone with a thick Scottish brogue, or maybe Australian slang, or Indian English rhythms.
And for the learner's brain, that's like having to recalibrate constantly.
Exactly. Instead of just recognizing a sound pattern instantly, your brain has to actively remap the sounds it's hearing onto the patterns it knows. This takes effort, especially with subtle things like how R is pronounced or the different vowel sounds. Think bath in the US versus the UK.
Or those D sounds. They're tricky if your language doesn't have them.
Definitely. Research confirms this. People consistently rate listening to foreign accented English as requiring more effort, even if they understand it perfectly well. That acoustic mismatch just demands constant, conscious decoding.
So it's like the brain is doing translation work even before it gets to the meaning.
In a way, yes, it adds a significant layer of processing right at the start, spiking the cognitive load immediately.
Okay, what's next? Trigger number 2, vocabulary and grammar gaps. This seems obvious. If you don't know the words, it's hard.
It is obvious, but the effect is more than just confusion. When your vocabulary is limited, every unknown word forces your brain to pause the flow. It has to try and guess from context or hold the unclear bit in working memory, hoping for clarification later.
Which uses up that precious mental energy we talked about.
Right. And there's a crucial interaction between vocabulary and noise here. It's a double whammy.
How so?
Well, if you have a large vocabulary, your brain is pretty good at predicting upcoming words based on context. So even if some sounds are masked by noise, you can often guess the missing word.
But if your vocabulary is smaller, you don't have as much context to rely on.
Exactly. You lose that predictive power. So if noise makes you miss a word, you're stuck. You have to strain much harder to catch every single sound because you can't rely on context to fill the gaps. It forces you back into that really effortful sound-by-sound decoding.
And idioms must be killer here. Like if someone says, he really kicked the bucket.
Oh, absolutely. Idioms, slang, complex grammatical structures, they all act as mini roadblocks. They derail comprehension momentarily and demand extra processing power to figure out, pulling resources away from just following the main conversation.
Okay, trigger 3.
Trigger number 3, speed of speech. This is a big one.
Native speakers can talk really fast.
They can. Easily 150, 160 words per minute, sometimes more in casual chat. For a brain already juggling accents and vocabulary, that speed can feel completely overwhelming.
It's like trying to read subtitles that are flying by too quickly.
A good analogy. And it's not just the speed, it's how native speakers connect words. It's called connected speech.
You mean like gonna for going to or want for want to?
Yes, but it's much more widespread than just those examples. Sounds get reduced, blended, even dropped entirely. Fish and chips might sound like fish and chips. I should have gone becomes I should have gone.
So the learner is listening for clear, separate words, but they're getting this smooth, blended stream of sound.
Precisely. And the brain has to work incredibly hard to segment that stream back into individual words it recognizes. This mismatch between expectation and reality massively slows down processing and ramps up the effort.
You can actually see this delay in reaction times, can't you?
Yes, studies show bilinguals often take measurably longer to respond in fast-paced English conversations, even in quiet settings. Add noise or complexity, and that delay gets bigger.
Which leads us nicely into the environmental triggers. Trigger number 4, background noise and adverse conditions. You said this is maybe the biggest amplifier.
Arguably, yes. Think about typical modern environments: noisy classrooms, open-plan offices, cafes, even poor quality audio on a Zoom call.
How does noise specifically make L2 listening so much harder?
Noise acts like camouflage for sounds. It masks the subtle acoustic cues, the little puffs of air for consonants, the slight changes in pitch or loudness that signal word boundaries that the brain relies on. Native speakers can often filter this out more easily because of those ingrained phototactic expectations we mentioned.
But the L2 listener has to actively fight to separate the signal from the noise.
Exactly. They have to use intense selective attention, constantly straining to filter, and that filtering process itself is incredibly mentally taxing. It drives up that pupil dilation and leads to much faster fatigue compared to native listeners in the same noise.
What about specific types of noise? Is busy chatter worse than, say, traffic noise?
Generally, yes. The absolute hardest type of noise for the brain to handle is competing speech. The classic cocktail party problem.
Trying to follow one conversation when others are happening around you.
Right. Native listeners are usually quite good at locking onto one voice, partly thanks to those finely tuned auditory filters. The L2 brain often struggles much more to separate those competing voices, requiring enormous effort just to track the person they're trying to listen to.
Okay, so we have accents, vocabulary gaps, speed, and noise. What else contributes?
Trigger number 5 is simply duration and intensity. Like any muscle, the brain gets tired with prolonged exertion.
So short bursts are okay, but long sessions are draining.
Exactly. A 20-minute podcast might be fine. A 3-hour workshop or a full day of meetings entirely in English. That guarantees you'll deplete those finite cognitive resources. The longer you sustain that high-intensity processing, the faster your performance declines.
That makes sense. And finally, trigger number 6, emotional and contextual factors. This isn't just about the sounds or words.
No, the psychological context matters hugely. Anxiety is a major factor.
How does anxiety make listening harder?
If you're worried about misunderstanding, especially in a high-stakes situation like a job interview or an important meeting, you tend to tense up and try even harder.
But we learned that trying harder past a certain point doesn't always help and just burns energy faster.
Precisely. The anxiety cranks up the effort, which leads to faster burnout, which ironically makes you more likely to misunderstand, which then fuels more anxiety. It's a vicious cycle.
And the stress itself consumes mental resources.
Absolutely. Your brain is using bandwidth to manage the anxiety, leaving less available for the actual task of listening and comprehension. So, put an anxious learner in a noisy room with a fast-talking speaker using unfamiliar slang.
And you've basically created the perfect recipe for brain burnout.
You really have. Understanding these 6 triggers, accents, vocab grammar, speed, noise, duration, and emotion is crucial because it allows you to anticipate the challenges and maybe adjust things proactively to lighten the load before fatigue really sets in.
Okay, we've got the science, we've got the triggers. Now, let's make this really concrete. How does this listening fatigue actually show up in everyday life for learners? In school, at work, even just watching TV?
Yeah, connecting the theory to real experience is so important because when you, the listener, recognize these scenarios, it validates what you're feeling. It's not just you, it's a predictable outcome of that cognitive strain.
Let's start with academic fatigue. You mentioned Maria, the Brazilian student in the U.S. lecture. Walk us through her experience.
Right. So Maria's in this 90-minute economics lecture. Big room, bit of an echo. The professor talks fast, Midwestern accent, lots of jargon. For the first, say, 20, 30 minutes, she's on it, taking good notes, focused.
She's compensating well initially.
Exactly. But then, maybe around the 35, 40-minute mark, the combined load of the accent, the speed, and the technical terms starts to overwhelm her working memory. She might mishear a key term, have to mentally backtrack.
That error correction takes effort.
A lot of effort. This is where she's approaching that effort ceiling. She's still trying really hard, but her notes get less detailed. Maybe she starts just writing down words instead of understanding concepts. Her mind starts to wander. She might fidget a bit.
Subtle signs the brain is struggling.
Very subtle. Then, by the last 15, 20 minutes, she's probably just zoning out. Physically present, nodding, but absorbing almost nothing.
And the result afterwards?
A classic fatigue crash, maybe a pounding headache, that feeling of brain fog, feeling irritable or drained. That's her system reacting to sustained high-level cognitive stress.
Okay, let's shift to the workplace. Professional fatigue. You mentioned Ahmed, the Egyptian professional in London.
Right. Ahmed's in an open-plan office meeting. It's noisy background chatter, phones. His team lead speaks quickly, maybe with a strong regional accent like Yorkshire, and uses lots of corporate acronyms or British slang he hasn't quite mastered.
So the main challenges are the noise, especially competing speech, and the dense, unfamiliar language.
Exactly. He's spending a ton of energy just trying to isolate his team lead's voice and then decode the slang or jargon on the fly. If he misses something like, "We need to crack on, get started," or "That's pants, that's rubbish," he has to mentally rewind.
While the meeting keeps moving forward. That sounds stressful.
It is. That constant mental backtracking slows him down. After maybe 45, 50 minutes, he might start mentally rehearsing what he wants to say, which means he's stopped actively listening. He's conserving energy for his own output.
I've seen people describe that online, feeling like their brain is fried after long meetings in L2.
It's a very common description. And for Ahmed, this isn't just discomfort. It affects his ability to contribute effectively, maybe makes him seem less engaged, which could impact his work performance.
What about trying to learn through entertainment? Media consumption fatigue. Let's talk about Lai, the Chinese learner watching Netflix.
Right, so Lai decides to binge watch a fast-paced show, maybe a comedy like Friends or something, dialogue heavy. Initially, maybe she uses English subtitles.
Which acts as a support, right, a cognitive stabilizer.
Definitely. It reduces the decoding load significantly, but if she tries watching without subtitles, the rapid dialogue, the cultural references, the sarcasms, it can become overwhelming quickly.
She might follow the basic plot, but miss the nuances, the jokes.
Yeah, and she finds herself constantly reaching for the remote pause, rewind, maybe look up a word. This stop-start process, while good for detailed learning, is actually very mentally taxing.
It's not passive viewing at all.
Not remotely. It's intense, focused decoding. So after maybe just 1 or 2 episodes, she feels mentally exhausted, maybe can't even remember the details of the first one clearly. That lines up with research showing poor retention after fatigued L2 exposure.
And lastly, the social side. Social fatigue. Sophia, the Italian learner at a party. This sounds like the ultimate challenge.
It really is. A party combines all the triggers. Background music, lots of competing conversations, that cocktail party problem again, different accents flying around, topics changing rapidly.
So Sophia's brain is trying to track multiple things at once in a really noisy environment.
It's overload. She might manage for, say, 20, 30 minutes, trying to follow conversations, maybe jumping between groups, but her processing speed starts lagging behind the native speakers.
She can't keep up with the back and forth.
It becomes really difficult. Filtering the noise, decoding accents, understanding rapid topic shifts, it's unsustainable. Eventually, she hits that wall. Her brain is too tired to formulate responses quickly enough.
That she resorts to.
That classic survival strategy. Smiling, nodding, maybe laughing when others laugh, but essentially withdrawing mentally. Hoping nobody asks her a direct, complex question, it signals complete overload.
It sounds similar to what people with hearing loss describe the exhaustion of constantly straining to stay connected.
There is a strong parallel. The L2 learner, even with perfect hearing, is constantly straining against the linguistic and acoustic barriers, and that effort is exhausting.
And we shouldn't forget kids. Child learner fatigue.
Critically important. Immigrant children in English-speaking schools face this daily. The cognitive load of learning subjects in English, while navigating classroom noise and social dynamics, it's immense.
So they might fatigue much faster than their native-speaking classmates.
Often, yes. Especially later in the school day, their ability to focus and retain information drops off.
We hear parents say things like, "My child comes home totally drained, too tired for homework."
It's a very real consequence. That daily cognitive depletion significantly impacts their learning progress and well-being.
These examples really paint a picture. Fatigue isn't about lack of effort, it's the brain signaling overload. So how can you, the listener, recognize the warning signs in yourself?
Early detection is key. We can group the symptoms. First, the physical symptoms.
Headaches.
Often, yes. Tension headaches, maybe behind the eyes or across the forehead. Also, actual eye strain from intense focus. And tension in the neck and shoulders, that physical bracing that happens when you concentrate hard for a long time.
Okay, what about mental symptoms?
This is the brain fog. Difficulty concentrating is a big one. Feeling forgetful, like information just isn't sticking. Your thinking feels slower, sluggish. Simple mental tasks seem harder.
And emotional symptoms.
Because the frontal lobe is tired, emotional regulation can suffer. So increased irritability, feeling easily frustrated, maybe heightened anxiety, especially that fear of missing something important.
And there's a typical timeline for this. When do symptoms usually kick in?
It varies with proficiency and the difficulty of the task, but for really intensive listening, like a complex lecture or meeting, symptoms can start to become noticeable after just 20 to 30 minutes.
Are there earlier, more subtle signs?
Definitely. Things like yawning more than usual, fidgeting, needing to reread something immediately because it didn't sink in, or finding yourself constantly asking people to repeat themselves. These are your brain's early warning signals saying, hey, I need a break.
And if you ignore these signs, what are the knock-on effects?
Well, your ability to remember what you heard plummets. Your performance in professional or academic settings can suffer. Socially, you might start avoiding situations that feel too taxing. And long-term, chronic, unmanaged fatigue can really kill motivation and stall your overall progress in English.
Okay, this all sounds quite challenging, but the good news, you said, is that it's manageable.
Absolutely. It's a hurdle, not a wall. Once you understand it, you can use specific strategies to deal with it effectively. Yes, the great thing is that cognitive load isn't fixed. You can actively manage it. With the right strategies, you can reduce fatigue and actually build up your listening stamina over time. It's about being smart, both long-term and in the moment.
Okay, let's start with the long game. What about building foundational skills? How does that help with fatigue?
Well, the stronger your core skills, the less effort each listening task requires initially. So start by deliberately choosing listening material that's maybe slightly below your current comfort level.
Easier stuff first. Why?
It lowers that initial cognitive load. You're not immediately straining. This builds confidence and prevents you from hitting that fatigue wall right away. Then you gradually increase the difficulty. A key part of this is exposing yourself to lots of different accents.
So deliberately listening to various accents helps the brain automate decoding them.
Exactly. Use tools, maybe websites like Youglish where you can hear words in different accents, or find podcasts featuring global speakers. The more variety your brain processes regularly, the less effort unfamiliar accents will require down the line. It's about training those neural pathways.
Makes sense. What about managing fatigue in the moment? You mentioned breaks.
Absolutely crucial. Structured breaks for cognitive recovery. You have to treat your brain like any muscle you're training. It needs recovery periods.
Like the Pomodoro technique.
The Pomodoro technique is perfect for this. Listen intently for, say, 25 minutes, then take a mandatory 5-minute break. Completely step away from English listening.
Just 5 minutes. Does that really help?
It makes a huge difference. That short pause allows those overworked parts of your brain, especially the frontal lobe, to disengage, replenish resources, and clear out the mental clutter. It prevents you from reaching that deep burnout state. Stand up, walk around, look out the window, anything non-linguistic.
So short, regular breaks are better than pushing through for 2 hours straight.
Far, far better. Trying to brute force it just leads to diminishing returns and deeper fatigue. Cyclical work and rest is key.
Okay, what else can we do in the moment? Environment matters, right?
Hugely. Optimize your environment. Since noise is such a massive fatigue amplifier, controlling your auditory space is critical.
So find quiet places.
Yeah.
Use headphones.
Yes. If you can, choose quiet spots for focused listening. If noise is unavoidable, good quality noise-canceling headphones are honestly a worthwhile investment for serious learners. They physically reduce the amount of filtering your brain has to do.
And for online learning or meetings, audio quality matters there too.
Definitely. Poor audio quality, echo, static, background noise from others forces your brain to work much harder just to decipher the basic sound. Using a good headset, maybe encouraging others to mute when not speaking, can significantly lower that cognitive strain.
All right, environment controlled. Can we change how we listen? Are there specific techniques?
Yes, using active listening techniques can make listening more efficient and less draining.
Like what? Not trying to catch every single word.
Exactly. Instead of trying to mentally translate everything in real time, which just jams your working memory, focus on grasping the main ideas. Listen for keywords. Try mentally summarizing or visualizing what the speaker is saying.
So engage with the meaning, not just the words.
Precisely. Another really powerful technique, especially when you're starting out or tackling difficult material, is to pair listening with reading.
Using transcripts or subtitles.
Yes. Having the text available while you listen acts as that cognitive stabilizer we talked about. The visual input confirms the auditory input, drastically reducing the effort your brain needs for decoding sounds, accents, or speed. It builds confidence and helps tune your ear.
Then you can gradually rely less on the text as your listening improves.
That's the idea. It's a fantastic bridge.
And we shouldn't forget the basics, right? like sleep and health.
Absolutely fundamental. Overall health and resilience. Your brain runs on energy. If you're sleep deprived, poorly nourished, or dehydrated, your cognitive performance will suffer and fatigue will set in much faster.
So adequate sleep for memory consolidation, exercise for blood flow, good nutrition for fuel.
And hydration. Dehydration seriously mimics and worsens brain fog and fatigue. Simple things, but they provide the essential foundation for sustained mental effort.
Finally, are there specific tools or resources that can help, leveraging technology and support?
For sure. Many apps and media players let you adjust playback speed. Slowing down audio just a fraction, say, to 0.8x or 0.9x speed can make complex material much more manageable without sacrificing comprehension, keeping you out of the fatigue zone.
Using subtitles strategically, as we mentioned.
Yes, and finding supportive practice environments, language exchange groups, low-pressure conversation clubs, places where you can practice listening in real time without the anxiety of being formally evaluated. This helps you gradually build tolerance for dynamic conversation.
It sounds like a combination of building skills, managing energy, controlling the environment, and using smart techniques.
That's exactly it. It's a holistic approach. And learners who implement these strategies really do find it transformative. Like that learner quote you shared earlier.
Right. Breaks and easier podcasts turn fatigue into progress. It shifts the whole experience. #tag outro.
So let's just wrap this up. The key thing to remember is that listening fatigue is absolutely real. It comes from that high cognitive load, your brain working in overdrive to process English.
Decoding sounds, handling accents, filtering noise, juggling vocabulary. It's a lot.
It is. But, and this is the crucial part, it's manageable. Understanding why it happens, the science, the triggers, gives you the power to intervene.
By using strategies like taking structured breaks, controlling noise, choosing the right materials, using active listening techniques.
Exactly. You can actively reduce that load and build your stamina. And please, be kind to yourself during this process. Every time you listen, even when it feels tiring, you are building those crucial neural pathways.
It's genuine brain-building work.
It really is. So, persistence, practice mindfully with these strategies will absolutely pay off. English will gradually feel less exhausting and much more like the empowering tool it should be. You really can overcome this.
That's a great, encouraging note to end on. And here's something interesting to think about as you go. We've talked a lot about managing cognitive load for English listening. Well, think about those strategies. Focused work, breaks, minimizing distractions. Could applying those same principles actually help you focus better and feel less fatigued, even when you're doing demanding tasks in your native language?
That's a fascinating thought. Improving focus in one area might have benefits elsewhere. The principles of attention management are quite universal.
Something to consider during your next well-earned break. Okay, if you found this deep dive helpful, if it shed some light on your own experiences, please do give us a like, maybe share it with fellow learners, and subscribe to the channel.
Your support really helps us continue making these deep dives. Keep listening, keep learning, and definitely remember to give that hardworking brain of yours regular rests.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for the next deep dive.